The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Aldermere Castle, as Captain Marcus Thornfield adjusted his ceremonial sword and prepared for another routine day as head of the Royal Guard. Little did he know that this particular Tuesday would change everything he thought he knew about the royal family he had sworn to protect. Marcus had served the crown for 15 years, rising through the ranks with unwavering dedication and a spotless record. At 38, he commanded respect from both his subordinates and superiors alike. His weathered face bore the marks of countless hours standing guard in harsh weather, and his steel-gray eyes missed nothing. The royal family of Valdoria trusted him implicitly, and he had never given them reason to doubt that trust. Queen Isabella Rosalind had ruled Valdoria for 23 years following her father's peaceful abdication. She was known throughout the kingdom for her wisdom, compassion, and dedication to her people. Her marriage to Prince Consort Edmund had produced 3 children, Crown Prince Alexander, 21, and preparing to take on more royal duties, Princess Charlotte, 16, and known for her spirited nature and love of adventure, and young Prince Oliver, just 12 years old and still focused more on his studies and horse riding than royal protocol. The Queen's sister-in-law, Duchess Camilla Blackwood, had lived at the castle since her husband's death in a hunting accident 5 years prior. A woman of refined tastes and sharp intellect, she served as an unofficial advisor to the Queen on matters of court etiquette and social affairs. Her relationship with the royal children was complicated. While she maintained proper decorum in public, there were whispers among the staff about her sometimes stern treatment of the younger royals when she thought no one was watching. On this particular morning, Marcus was conducting his weekly inspection of the castle grounds when he noticed unusual activity near the servants' quarters. A large, ornate trunk was being loaded onto a carriage by 2 men he didn't recognize. The trunk itself was unremarkable except for its size and the expensive brass fittings that suggested it belonged to someone of considerable means. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't the trunk itself, but the nervous behavior of the men handling it. They kept glancing around anxiously as if afraid of being observed. When they spotted Marcus watching them from across the courtyard, they immediately quickened their pace, nearly dropping the heavy trunk in their haste. Marcus's instincts, honed by years of protecting the royal family, immediately went on high alert. Nothing happened at Aldermere Castle without his knowledge, especially not the movement of large pieces of luggage by unknown individuals. He approached the carriage with measured steps, his hand resting casually on his sword hilt, a gesture that appeared relaxed but was actually a clear warning to anyone who might be watching. "Good morning, gentlemen," Marcus called out in his authoritative voice. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Captain Thornfield, head of the Royal Guard. Might I inquire about your business here this morning?" The 2 men exchanged nervous glances. The older of the 2, a thin man with graying hair and shifty eyes, stepped forward. "We're here on behalf of the Duchess Camilla, Captain. She's asked us to transport some of her personal belongings to her country estate. Nothing more than routine household management, I assure you." Marcus studied the man carefully. Something about his demeanor didn't sit right. In his experience, legitimate castle staff and authorized visitors carried themselves with confidence, not the barely concealed anxiety he was witnessing. "I see. And you have proper documentation for this transfer, I presume?" The man's face paled slightly. "Well, you see, Captain, the Duchess gave us verbal instructions," she said. "There wouldn't be any need for written orders for such a simple task." This raised another red flag for Marcus. The Duchess was known for her meticulous attention to detail and proper procedure. She would never authorize the removal of valuable items without proper documentation, especially not by men who weren't part of the regular castle staff. "I'm afraid I'll need to verify this with the Duchess personally," Marcus said firmly. "In the meantime, I'll need to inspect the contents of that trunk. Standard security protocol, you understand." The reaction was immediate and telling. Both men became visibly agitated, and the younger one, a burly fellow with rough hands that suggested he was more accustomed to manual labor than handling delicate aristocratic belongings, actually took a step backward toward the carriage. "That's really not necessary, Captain," the older man said quickly. "As I mentioned, these are personal items belonging to the Duchess. Surely you wouldn't want to violate her privacy by rummaging through her private possessions.
I'm responsible for the security of everything and everyone in this castle. If there's nothing to hide, then there should be no objection to a brief inspection. The tension in the courtyard was palpable. Several other guards had noticed the commotion and were slowly moving closer, though they maintained a respectful distance unless their captain signaled for assistance. The morning bustle of castle life continued around them, but Marcus could see servants and staff members casting curious glances in their direction. "Now see here," the older man said, his voice rising slightly with desperation. "We're operating under direct orders from a member of the royal family. You have no right to detain us or inspect our cargo without proper cause." "Actually," Marcus replied calmly, "I have every right and responsibility to inspect anything leaving these grounds. That's what the royal family pays me to do." He gestured to two of his guards who had been watching the exchange. "Sergeants Morrison and Vale, please assist me with opening this trunk." The two men made one last desperate attempt to prevent the inspection. "This is highly irregular, Captain. The Duchess will be most displeased when she learns of this unnecessary delay and invasion of privacy. I strongly urge you to reconsider." But Marcus had made up his mind. His instincts were screaming that something was very wrong with this situation, and 15 years of faithful service had taught him to trust those instincts above all else. He approached the trunk with his two sergeants flanking him, while the mysterious men watched with barely concealed panic. The trunk was indeed large, easily big enough to hold several traveling wardrobes worth of clothing and personal effects. Its polished wood surface was adorned with brass corners and an elaborate locking mechanism that spoke of both quality and expense. Marcus noted that despite its size, the trunk seemed surprisingly heavy, even for two strong men to manage. As he reached for the brass latches, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to uncover something that would change everything. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders, not just his duty to the crown, but his obligation to protect the innocent and uphold justice. Whatever was in this trunk, he suspected it would test every principle he held dear. The latches clicked open with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly quiet courtyard. Marcus lifted the heavy lid, prepared for almost anything: stolen treasures, forbidden documents, perhaps evidence of some political intrigue. What he was not prepared for was the sight that greeted him as the trunk opened fully. Curled up inside, bound and gagged but very much alive, was Princess Charlotte herself. The discovery sent shockwaves through everyone present. Princess Charlotte's eyes were wide with fear and relief as she looked up at her rescuer. Her usually pristine appearance was disheveled, her elaborate court dress wrinkled and torn in places, suggesting a struggle. Despite her obvious distress, she seemed physically unharmed, though the terror in her young face spoke volumes about the ordeal she had endured. Marcus immediately sprang into action, his training taking over despite the unprecedented nature of the situation. "Sergeant Morrison, assist the princess immediately. Sergeant Vale, secure these two men. They're under arrest for kidnapping and treason against the crown." His voice carried across the courtyard with unmistakable authority. The two conspirators realized their game was up. The older man made a desperate attempt to flee, but he hadn't taken more than 3 steps before 2 more guards intercepted him. The younger man seemed to consider fighting his way out, but the sight of half a dozen armed guards surrounding him quickly convinced him that resistance would be futile. As gentle hands helped Princess Charlotte from her horrific prison, Marcus's mind was already racing ahead to the implications of what he had uncovered. This wasn't a simple case of theft or unauthorized removal of property. This was an attempt to kidnap a member of the royal family. The questions that immediately arose were staggering in their complexity and potential consequences. Who had ordered this kidnapping? Where were they planning to take the princess? What was their ultimate goal? Ransom, political leverage, or something even more sinister? And perhaps most troubling of all, how had they managed to orchestrate this plot from within the castle walls themselves? The fact that they had claimed to be acting on behalf of Duchess Camilla was particularly concerning. Was the Duchess somehow involved in this treasonous plot, or were the kidnappers simply using her name to lend legitimacy to their actions? Marcus knew he would need to investigate this angle very carefully, as accusations against a member of the royal family, even by marriage, could have far-reaching political ramifications. As Princess Charlotte was gently removed from the trunk, and her bindings carefully cut away, Marcus could see the full extent of what she had endured. Her wrists showed marks from the ropes, and her voice was hoarse when she finally spoke, her first words of freedom. "Captain Thornfield," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank goodness you found me. I thought I was so afraid." Marcus knelt beside her, his usually stern demeanor softening with genuine concern. "You're safe now, Your Highness. Can you tell me who did this to you? How long have you been in there?" Princess Charlotte's eyes filled with tears as the reality of her rescue began to sink in. "I'm not sure how long. It felt like hours. I was in my chambers preparing for morning lessons when someone came up behind me. I never saw their face. The next thing I knew, I woke up in that horrible place." The revelation that the kidnapping had taken place within the castle itself sent another chill down Marcus's spine. The security implications were staggering. If someone could abduct a member of the royal family from their own chambers without detection, then nowhere in the castle could be considered truly safe. Marcus turned his attention back to the two captured men, who were now securely restrained and flanked by guards. "I want these men taken to the castle dungeons immediately. Place them in separate cells and post round-the-clock guards. No one, and I mean no one, is to speak with them without my explicit permission." As the prisoners were led away, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The older man, despite his capture, had a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It wasn't the expression of a defeated criminal, but rather someone who believed that despite this setback, a larger plan was still in motion. The implications were terrifying. If this kidnapping attempt was just one part of a larger conspiracy against the royal family, then Princess Charlotte might still be in danger, along with her brothers and parents. Marcus realized he was dealing with something far more complex and dangerous than a simple abduction for ransom. As castle physicians were summoned to examine Princess Charlotte and ensure she hadn't suffered any serious harm, Marcus began organizing the immediate response to this crisis. The castle would need to be placed on high alert, with security measures increased throughout the grounds. Every member of the staff would need to be questioned, and their backgrounds investigated anew. Most importantly, he would need to inform the Queen and King Consort of what had transpired, a conversation he was dreading despite the successful rescue of their daughter. But even as he began coordinating these essential tasks, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The morning had started with what seemed like a routine inspection and had exploded into a full-blown crisis that threatened the very foundations of the royal family's security. As he watched Princess Charlotte being gently escorted back into the castle, surrounded by guards and medical attendants, he wondered what other surprises this day might hold. The investigation that would follow would need to be thorough, swift, and above all, discreet. If word of this incident leaked beyond the castle walls, it could cause panic among the population and potentially encourage other would-be conspirators to attempt similar attacks. The safety of the royal family depended not just on catching these particular criminals, but on uncovering the full scope of whatever plot they were part of. As Marcus stood in the now quiet courtyard looking at the abandoned carriage and the ornate trunk that had nearly become Princess Charlotte's tomb, he made a silent vow. Whatever it took, whoever was involved, he would get to the bottom of this conspiracy and ensure that such an attack could never happen again. The trust placed in him by the royal family was sacred, and he would not fail in his duty to protect them. The morning sun, which had seemed so peaceful and routine just an hour earlier, now felt ominous as it illuminated the scene of what could have been an unthinkable tragedy. Marcus knew that the easy part, the rescue itself, was over. The real work of investigation, interrogation, and unraveling the conspiracy was just beginning. The great throne room of Aldermere Castle had witnessed many momentous occasions throughout its centuries of existence, but few as grave as the emergency council session that convened barely 2 hours after Princess Charlotte's rescue. Queen Isabella sat upon her throne with her characteristic composure, though Marcus could see the barely controlled fury burning in her dark eyes. King Consort Edmund stood beside her, his usually gentle demeanor replaced by a steely determination that reminded everyone present why he had once been considered one of the kingdom's finest military strategists. Crown Prince Alexander had rushed back from his diplomatic training session in the capital, his face pale with shock at the news of his sister's near abduction. Young Prince Oliver, deemed too young to participate in the emergency session,
had been placed under heavy guard in the royal quarters along with Princess Charlotte, who was still recovering from her ordeal under the careful attention of the court physicians. Marcus stood before the assembled royalty and advisors, delivering his preliminary report with military precision. Your Majesty, the immediate threat to Princess Charlotte has been neutralized, and she appears to have suffered no serious physical harm. However, the implications of this attack run much deeper than a simple kidnapping attempt. The Queen's voice was steady but cold as winter's steel. Explain, Captain Thornfield. Leave nothing out. The two perpetrators claim to be acting on behalf of Duchess Camilla, transporting her personal belongings. This was clearly a fabrication designed to avoid suspicion. But the fact that they chose to invoke the Duchess's name specifically suggests either a direct connection to her or detailed knowledge of castle operations that would make such a cover story plausible.
A murmur ran through the assembled advisors.
The implications were clear to everyone present. Either they were dealing with an inside conspiracy involving a member of the royal family, or the security breach was so comprehensive that outsiders had intimate knowledge of internal castle procedures. King Consort Edmund stepped forward, his military training evident in his bearing.
Captain, what is your assessment of the Duchess's involvement in this plot? Marcus had been dreading this question, knowing how carefully he would need to navigate the political implications of his answer. Your Majesty, I believe a thorough investigation is warranted before drawing any conclusions.
However, I can say with certainty that the Duchess has not been seen in the castle since yesterday evening, when she reportedly retired to her chambers after dinner. Her current whereabouts are unknown.
The silence that followed this revelation was deafening. Queen Isabella's knuckles were white where she gripped the arms of her throne, and Crown Prince Alexander looked as though he had been physically struck. The possibility that a trusted member of the royal family could be involved in such treachery was almost too terrible to contemplate. "Find her," the Queen commanded, her voice carrying the full weight of royal authority. "Search the castle, from tower to dungeon. Question every servant, every guard, every stable hand. I want to know exactly when she was last seen and by whom." Marcus bowed deeply. "Already in progress, Your Majesty. I've assigned teams to search every room in the castle and interview all staff members. Additionally, I've sent riders to her country estate and other known residences to determine if she might have traveled there." The Queen's chief advisor, Lord Chancellor Pemberton, cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, if I may suggest, we must also consider the possibility that the Duchess herself has been compromised, perhaps kidnapped or coerced into cooperating with these conspirators." It was a diplomatic way of acknowledging the various possibilities without immediately condemning a member of the royal family, and Marcus appreciated the older man's political wisdom. However, his own instincts were telling him a different story. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "during my interrogation of the prisoners, certain details have emerged that suggest this operation required extensive planning and intimate knowledge of castle routines. The timing of the attempted removal, the use of authorized-looking transportation, the knowledge of which servants' quarters to access. All of these factors indicate coordination with someone who has regular access to sensitive information." Crown Prince Alexander, who had been listening intently to every word, finally spoke up. "Captain, are you saying you believe Aunt Camilla is actively involved in this conspiracy?" Marcus met the young prince's gaze steadily. "I'm saying that the evidence points to involvement by someone with detailed knowledge of castle operations and the authority to move freely throughout the grounds. Whether that person acted voluntarily or under coercion remains to be determined." The Queen rose from her throne, her royal bearing commanding immediate attention from everyone present. "Captain Thornfield, I want you to personally oversee the interrogation of these prisoners. Use whatever methods are necessary to extract the truth from them. If there is a conspiracy against my family, I want every participant identified and brought to justice. It shall be done, Your Majesty. However, I must caution that professional conspirators are often trained to withstand interrogation. It may take time to break them down." "Time is a luxury we cannot afford," the Queen replied sharply. "If there are other attacks planned, if other members of my family are in danger, I need to know immediately." Marcus nodded gravely. "I understand completely, Your Majesty. I've already taken the liberty of implementing enhanced security measures throughout the castle. All routine activities have been suspended, Additional guards have been posted at all entrances and exits, and no one is to move through the castle unescorted. The emergency session continued for another hour as various security protocols were established and contingency plans discussed. Messages would need to be sent to allied kingdoms alerting them to the potential threat, while maintaining enough discretion to avoid causing widespread panic. The royal family's public appearances would be cancelled indefinitely, and a cover story would be developed to explain any changes in their routine. As the meeting concluded, Queen Isabella asked Marcus to remain behind for a private consultation. When they were alone, except for the king consort, her carefully maintained composure finally cracked slightly. "Captain, I need you to tell me honestly, how close did we come to losing Charlotte today?" Marcus considered his words carefully before responding. "Your Majesty, if I had not chosen to inspect that particular carriage at that particular moment, Princess Charlotte would likely have been beyond our reach within the hour."
The timing suggests that the conspirators had planned their route carefully and had a specific destination in mind. The king consort placed a protective hand on his wife's shoulder.
"Do you have any theories about where they might have been taking her? Based on the direction the carriage was heading and the supplies I observed, I believe they were planning to leave the immediate area entirely. This wasn't a local operation. They had resources and planning that suggest backing from someone with considerable means and influence." Queen Isabella sank back into her throne, the weight of the day's events finally showing in her expression. "In 23 years of rule, I have faced rebellions, natural disasters, and political crises of every imaginable type. But the thought that someone could penetrate our defenses so completely, could come so close to harming one of my children," her voice trailed off, and for a moment she looked not like a mighty queen, but like a frightened mother. "Your Majesty," Marcus said gently, "I give you my word that we will find everyone involved in this conspiracy and bring them to justice. Your family's safety is my highest priority, and I will not rest until this threat is eliminated completely." The Queen straightened, her resolve returning. "I know you will, Captain. You've served our family with distinction for many years, and today you saved my daughter's life. But I need more than justice. I need assurance that this can never happen again." "Of course, Your Majesty. I'm already working on a comprehensive review of our security procedures. Every protocol will be examined and strengthened where necessary." As Marcus left the throne room to continue his investigation, he felt the enormous weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The successful rescue of Princess Charlotte had been only the beginning. Now he faced the far more complex challenge of unraveling a conspiracy that clearly had roots deep within the castle's own walls. His first stop was the castle dungeons, where the two captured conspirators were being held in separate cells under heavy guard. The older man, who had given his name as Thomas Blackwood, a name that set off alarm bells given its similarity to the Duchess's surname, sat in sullen silence when Marcus approached his cell. "Good afternoon, Thomas," Marcus said conversationally. "I hope you're finding your accommodations adequate." The prisoner looked up with cold eyes. "I have nothing to say to you, Captain. I know my rights under kingdom law." "Your rights?" Marcus laughed harshly. "You've committed treason against the crown. Your rights at this point are whatever I decide they are." He pulled up a chair and sat down just outside the cell bars, close enough to make the prisoner uncomfortable. "But I'm willing to be reasonable. Answer my questions honestly, and I'll ensure you receive a quick death instead of the prolonged execution that treason typically warrants." The man's composure wavered slightly at the mention of execution, but he remained silent. Marcus tried a different approach. "Tell me about your relationship with Duchess Camilla. Are you a relative, perhaps?" The name similarity is quite interesting. This time the reaction was more pronounced. The prisoner's eyes widened slightly, and he shifted uncomfortably on his stone bench. "I don't know what you're talking about. Come now, Thomas. Blackwood is not exactly a common surname, and your knowledge of castle procedures suggests you've spent considerable time here. Perhaps you're a distant cousin of the Duchess? Someone with legitimate access to the grounds who could move freely without attracting suspicion." The prisoner's silence was telling. Marcus could see that he had struck close to the truth, and he pressed his advantage. "You realize, of course, that we'll eventually uncover your true identity, whether you cooperate or not. Castle records going back generations are quite thorough."
But your cooperation now could make the difference between a merciful sentence and a very unpleasant death."
Still no response, but Marcus could see beads of sweat forming on the man's forehead despite the cool temperature in the dungeon. "Let me tell you what I think happened," Marcus continued, settling back in his chair as if he had all the time in the world. "I think you and your companion were hired by someone to kidnap Princess Charlotte. Someone paid you very well for this job, didn't they? Enough money to make the risk seem worthwhile." The prisoner's breathing had become slightly labored, a sign that Marcus's words were hitting their mark. "But here's what I think you didn't realize," Marcus went on. "I think whoever hired you has no intention of letting you live to spend that money. Conspirators like this always eliminate loose ends, and you and your friend are definitely loose ends." This finally provoked a reaction. The prisoner's head snapped up, and for the first time, fear was clearly visible in his eyes. Marcus leaned forward. "Think about it, Thomas. You've been captured. You know the identity of whoever hired you. You're now a liability to them. How long do you think it will be before they arrange for you to have an unfortunate accident in your cell? Poisoned food, perhaps? A conveniently placed sharp object that makes it look like suicide?" The prisoner's face had gone pale. "You're lying." "They wouldn't. Wouldn't they?" Marcus interrupted. "We're talking about people willing to kidnap a 16-year-old girl. Do you really think they have any scruples about eliminating hired help?" The psychological pressure was having its intended effect, but before the prisoner could respond, one of Marcus's sergeants appeared at the dungeon entrance. "Captain, urgent message from the search teams," the sergeant called out. "They've found something in the Duchess's chambers." Marcus rose immediately, his interrogation tactics having planted seeds of doubt that would continue to work on the prisoner's mind during his absence. "We'll continue this conversation later, Thomas. In the meantime, I suggest you think very carefully about whether your employer's loyalty to you is worth your life." The discovery in Duchess Camilla's chambers proved to be a collection of letters hidden in a false bottom of her jewelry box. The correspondence revealed a complex web of financial difficulties, political pressures, and ultimately a desperate agreement to cooperate with unknown conspirators in exchange for a substantial payment and safe passage out of the kingdom. The letters painted a picture of a woman trapped by circumstances beyond her control, but also revealed that the kidnapping plot was far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Princess Charlotte had been merely the first target. The ultimate goal was the systematic elimination or capture of all royal heirs, clearing the way for a political takeover by forces that remained frustratingly anonymous in the correspondence. As Marcus read through the damning evidence, he realized that they had stumbled onto something far more dangerous than a simple kidnapping. They were dealing with a full-scale conspiracy to overthrow the monarchy itself, and the rescue of Princess Charlotte had only delayed the inevitable unless they could identify and neutralize all the conspirators involved. The trail was growing cold with each passing hour, and Marcus knew that somewhere out there, dangerous enemies were already regrouping and planning their next move. The hidden chamber beneath the castle's east wing had remained undisturbed for over 2 centuries, its very existence known only to a handful of historians and senior castle staff. It was in this dusty, torchlit space that Marcus found himself 3 days after Princess Charlotte's rescue, surrounded by ancient documents and maps that were beginning to reveal the true scope of the conspiracy they faced. The breakthrough had come when the castle's elderly librarian, Master Geoffrey, had approached Marcus with a trembling hand and a knowing look in his rheumy eyes. "Captain," the old man had whispered, "there are things about this castle's history that you need to understand. Things that might explain why someone would choose this particular time to strike at the royal family." Now, as Marcus examined centuries-old architectural plans by candlelight, he was beginning to understand what Master Geoffrey had meant. The castle was riddled with secret passages, hidden chambers, and forgotten tunnels that had been sealed off generations ago for security reasons. But someone with access to these historical documents would know exactly how to move through the castle unseen. "Look here, Captain," Master Geoffrey said, pointing to a faded diagram with a gnarled finger. "This passage runs directly from the guest quarters where the Duchess was housed to the servants' area where Princess Charlotte was abducted. Someone using this route could move between those locations without being seen by any of the regular guard posts." Studied the diagram intently. The implications were staggering. If the conspirators had known about these hidden passages, They could have been planning and coordinating their activities for months without detection. Worse yet, they might still be using them to move around the castle undetected. Master Geoffrey, how many people would have access to information about these passages? The old librarian scratched his white beard thoughtfully. Very few, Captain. The castle's senior architects, perhaps the head of household staff, and he paused, his expression growing troubled. And who else? Marcus prompted. Well, traditionally, all members of the royal family are briefed on the castle's emergency evacuation routes when they come of age. This would include knowledge of at least some of the hidden passages. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. If Duchess Camilla had been briefed on the castle's secret passages, she could have shared that information with the conspirators, giving them an enormous advantage in planning their attack. But more troubling was the implication that other members of the royal family might also be at risk from someone with this knowledge. I need you to show me every passage, every hidden chamber, every secret route in this castle, Marcus said urgently. If there are conspirators still at large, we need to know how they might be moving around. Over the next several hours, Master Geoffrey led Marcus through a labyrinthine network of hidden passages that connected virtually every major section of the castle. Some were wide enough for several people to pass through comfortably, while others were barely large enough for a single person to crawl through. All of them had been designed with one purpose in mind: to allow the royal family and their most trusted allies to move secretly in times of danger. The irony was not lost on Marcus that these passages, designed to protect the royal family, were now being used to threaten them. As they explored each route, he made careful notes about strategic positions where guards could be posted to monitor the passages without being detected by anyone using them. The most disturbing discovery came when they reached a passage that led directly to the royal family's private quarters. The passage opened behind a tapestry in the main hallway, less than 50 feet from the bedchambers where the queen, king consort, and their children slept each night. Master Geoffrey, Marcus said grimly, how long have these passages been sealed? Most of them were closed off during the renovation 20 years ago, the librarian replied. But the seals were not permanent. They could be opened by anyone with the right knowledge and tools. Marcus's blood ran cold as he examined the entrance to the passage near the royal quarters. The ancient seal had been recently broken, and there were clear signs that someone had used this route within the past few days. Fresh scuff marks on the floor, disturbed dust patterns, and even a few threads caught on the rough stone walls told the story of recent passage. We need to return to the surface immediately, Marcus said, his voice tight with urgency. If someone has been using these passages to spy on the royal family, they may know far more about our security measures than we realized. As they emerged from the hidden chamber, Marcus's mind was racing with the implications of what they had discovered. The conspiracy was far more sophisticated than he had initially believed, and the conspirators had advantages he was only beginning to understand. But knowledge was power, and now that he knew about the secret passages, he could turn them to his own advantage. His first priority was to establish security in all the critical passage routes. Teams of his most trusted guards were quickly and quietly deployed to monitor key positions throughout the network. If the conspirators tried to use the passages again, they would walk directly into a trap. The second priority was to resume his interrogation of the captured prisoners, armed now with much more specific information about the conspiracy's methods and capabilities. When Marcus returned to the dungeons, he found Thomas Blackwood exactly where he had left him, but the man's demeanor had changed significantly. 3 days of isolation and uncertainty had taken their toll, and the psychological seeds Marcus had planted were clearly beginning to bear fruit. "Good evening, Thomas," Marcus said pleasantly as he settled into his chair outside the cell. "I trust you've had time to think about our previous conversation." The prisoner looked up with haunted eyes. I've been thinking about what you said, about them not wanting any loose ends." "Ah, yes. Have you reached any conclusions?" Thomas shifted nervously on his stone bench. "How do I know you won't just execute me anyway, even if I cooperate?" Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Thomas, I'm going to be completely honest with you. You've committed treason against the crown. Under normal circumstances, that would mean death regardless of any cooperation. However, these are not normal circumstances." The prisoner waited silently for him to continue. We've discovered that you and your partner were part of something much larger than a simple kidnapping. There's a conspiracy against the royal family that threatens the stability of the entire kingdom. Your information could be crucial in stopping that conspiracy and saving innocent lives." Marcus paused to let this sink in before continuing. "If you provide complete and honest cooperation, I can guarantee that your sentence will be commuted to life imprisonment rather than execution. You'll live, Thomas, but you'll spend the rest of your days in a cell. That's the best offer you're going to get." The prisoner was silent for several long minutes, clearly wrestling with his decision. Finally, he looked up at Marcus with resignation in his eyes. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Marcus replied simply. "Start with who hired you and your partner. I want names, locations, payment methods, everything you can remember." Thomas took a deep breath before beginning his confession. "We were contacted 6 months ago by a man calling himself Lord Ashford. I never saw his face. He always met with us at night, in abandoned buildings outside the city. He paid us well for information about castle routines, guard rotations, staff schedules." Marcus made careful notes as the prisoner spoke. "Describe this Lord Ashford. Height, build, voice, anything distinctive about him." "Average height, maybe a bit shorter than you. He spoke like an educated man, someone used to commanding others. He knew things about the castle that only an insider would know. Specific details about which servants worked which shifts, which guards could be trusted, which ones might be bought." This confirmed Marcus's suspicions about inside knowledge, but it also raised new questions. Did he ever mention other operations, other targets besides Princess Charlotte? The princess was just the beginning. He talked about removing all potential heirs to the throne, clearing the way for what he called necessary changes in leadership. Did he ever mention who would take control after these necessary changes? No specific names, but he talked about a council of nobles who were dissatisfied with the queen's policies. He said there were others in the kingdom who believed it was time for new leadership, people with more practical views about governance. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a conspiracy to harm the royal family. It was a planned coup designed to overthrow the entire government. The implications for the kingdom were staggering. "Tell me about the timeline, Thomas. When were these other operations supposed to take place?" The prisoner's face grew even paler. "Soon." He said that once we successfully took the princess, it would signal the beginning of the final phase. The other operations were supposed to follow within days. Marcus leaned forward urgently. "What other operations? Be specific." "I don't know all the details, but there was talk about an accident befalling the crown prince during one of his public appearances, and something about the young Prince Oliver's riding instructor being replaced with someone more cooperative." The full scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear, and it was even worse than Marcus had feared. The conspirators weren't content with simply eliminating the heirs to the throne. They were planning to do it in ways that would appear to be accidents, avoiding the public outrage that would result from obvious assassinations. "Thomas, this is crucial. Did Lord Ashford ever mention specific dates for these operations?" The prisoner thought carefully before answering. "He said everything had to be completed before the summer solstice festival. Something about the importance of acting while the royal family was still vulnerable, and before they could strengthen their position." Marcus calculated quickly in his head. The summer solstice was less than 2 weeks away. If the prisoners were telling the truth, they had very little time to identify and stop the remaining conspirators before they struck again. "One more question, Thomas. Did Lord Ashford ever mention the Duchess Camilla directly? Did he say anything about her role in the conspiracy?" The prisoner's expression grew troubled. He knew things about her that made it seem like they had been in contact. Personal things, financial problems, family secrets. But he never said she was working with us directly. It was more like he was using information about her to make our cover story believable. This revelation cast Duchess Camilla's disappearance in a new light. Perhaps she hadn't been a willing participant in the conspiracy after all, but rather another victim of the conspirators' manipulation. If she had been coerced or blackmailed into cooperating, she might still be in danger herself. As Marcus concluded the interrogation and prepared to question the second prisoner, his mind was already working on the next steps in the investigation. They now had a timeline, a general description of the conspiracy's leadership, and specific intelligence about planned future attacks.
but they still needed to identify the specific individuals involved and locate them before they could strike again. The castle was no longer just a home to the royal family. It had become a battlefield in a shadow war for control of the kingdom itself, and Marcus knew that the next few days would determine not just the fate of the royal family, but the future of Valdoria itself. Time was running out, and somewhere in the darkness, enemies were preparing to strike again. The race to stop them had begun in earnest, and failure was not an option Marcus could afford to contemplate. The war room in the castle's north tower had been hastily converted from its usual function as a strategic planning center for military campaigns to the nerve center of an operation to save the monarchy itself. Maps of the kingdom covered every wall, marked with red pins indicating suspected conspirator locations and blue pins showing loyal military installations. Marcus stood at the center of it all, coordinating what had become the most complex security operation in the kingdom's history. 5 days had passed since Princess Charlotte's rescue, and the intelligence gathered from the interrogations had painted a picture of a conspiracy so vast and well-coordinated that it threatened to shake the very foundations of the realm. The mysterious Lord Ashford had not been idle during his 6 months of preparation. He had methodically identified and recruited dissatisfied nobles, corrupt merchants, and ambitious military officers throughout the kingdom. "Captain," announced Sergeant Morrison as he entered the war room with a stack of urgent dispatches. "We've received responses from our agents in the northern provinces. Lord Ashford has been positively identified as Sir Roderick Ashford, the Queen's distant cousin, who was passed over for succession 25 years ago." Marcus felt a grim satisfaction at finally having a name and face to attach to their primary adversary. Sir Roderick had been exiled from court decades ago following a failed attempt to challenge the Queen's right to succession, claiming that as a male relative, he had a stronger claim to the throne than she did. His exile had apparently not dampened his ambitions, merely given him time to plan a more sophisticated approach to seizing power. "What else do we know about his current activities?" Marcus asked as he examined the intelligence reports. "He's been moving throughout the northern provinces for the past month, meeting with various noble families who have grievances against the crown. Our agents report that he's been quite successful in building support, promising favorable treatment and increased autonomy to anyone who supports his claim to the throne." This was troubling news, but not entirely unexpected. The northern provinces had always been somewhat resistant to central authority, preferring their traditional feudal independence to the more unified governance that Queen Isabella had worked to establish throughout her reign. "Any word on the whereabouts of Duchess Camilla?" Marcus inquired. Sergeant Morrison's expression grew more serious. "Yes, sir, and it's not good news. She was found this morning at a remote monastery in the eastern mountains. She's alive, but barely. The monks report that she arrived 3 days ago in a state of near collapse, claiming she had been held prisoner and forced to cooperate in a plot against the royal family." Marcus absorbed this information with mixed emotions. On one hand, it suggested that the Duchess had indeed been a victim rather than a willing conspirator. On the other hand, her condition indicated that the conspirators were becoming increasingly desperate and ruthless in their methods. What is her current status? The monastery's healers are caring for her, but she's been severely traumatized and is barely coherent. She keeps repeating something about the children must be protected and the solstice cannot come to pass. The reference to the solstice confirmed what Thomas Blackwood had revealed during his interrogation. The conspirators were working to a specific timeline, and that deadline was now less than a week away. Marcus felt the pressure of time bearing down on him like a physical weight. "I want the Duchess brought back to the castle immediately, but with the utmost care for her condition. We need her testimony to understand exactly what she was forced to do and what information she might have been compelled to reveal." As Sergeant Morrison departed to arrange for the Duchess's transport, Marcus turned his attention to the most pressing concern: protecting the royal family from the immediate threats that had been identified. Crown Prince Alexander's public appearances had already been cancelled, but his duties required him to meet with various diplomatic delegations and provincial governors. Each of these meetings now represented a potential opportunity for assassination. Young Prince Oliver presented an even more complex challenge. His daily routine included riding lessons with Master Garrett, an instructor who had served the royal family for over a decade. However, the intelligence from the prisoners suggested that Master Garrett might have been compromised or replaced by someone working for the conspirators. The challenge was determining the truth.
without alerting potential enemies to their suspicions. Marcus had devised a careful plan to test Master Garrett's loyalty without putting Prince Oliver at risk. A series of subtle changes to the riding lesson schedule would be implemented, along with hidden observers who could monitor the instructor's reactions and behavior. If Master Garrett was indeed working for the conspirators, these changes would likely provoke some kind of suspicious response. The plan was put into action the following morning. Prince Oliver was informed that his riding lesson would be moved to a different time and location due to maintenance work on the usual riding grounds. Master Garrett was given this information through the normal channels and told to adjust his schedule accordingly. What happened next confirmed Marcus's worst fears. Within an hour of receiving the schedule change, Master Garrett was observed leaving the castle grounds and riding rapidly toward the town. Hidden agents followed him to a tavern on the outskirts of the settlement, where he was seen meeting with a man matching the description of one of Lord Ashford's known associates. The meeting was brief, but the implications were clear. Master Garrett was indeed working for the conspirators, and he had been positioned to harm Prince Oliver during what should have been a routine riding lesson. The fact that he had immediately reported the schedule change to his handlers suggested that an attack had been planned for that very day. Marcus made the difficult decision to allow Master Garrett to return to the castle rather than arresting him immediately. If they could catch him in the act of attempting to harm Prince Oliver, it would provide definitive proof of the conspiracy's methods and might lead to additional intelligence about other planned attacks. The trap was set with meticulous care. Prince Oliver would attend his rescheduled riding lesson as planned, but under circumstances very different from what either Master Garrett or his confederates expected. Hidden archers were positioned throughout the area. Additional guards were disguised as stable hands and groundskeepers, and Marcus himself would be watching from a concealed location with a clear view of the entire lesson area. Prince Oliver, unaware of the danger surrounding him, arrived for his lesson with his characteristic enthusiasm. At 12 years old, he was an accomplished rider who genuinely enjoyed these sessions, and his natural skill made him a favorite of the castle's horsemasters. Marcus felt a pang of guilt at using the innocent boy as bait, but the alternative, allowing the conspirators to strike without warning, was far worse. Master Garrett appeared to conduct the lesson normally, guiding Prince Oliver through a series of increasingly complex riding exercises. For the first half hour, nothing seemed amiss, and Marcus began to wonder if perhaps their intelligence had been incorrect. Then he noticed the subtle change in Master Garrett's behavior. The instructor began positioning Prince Oliver for jumps that would take him farther from the main group of observers and closer to a wooded area at the edge of the riding grounds. Marcus's hand instinctively moved to his sword as he recognized the tactical positioning. The attack, when it came, was swift and nearly successful. As Prince Oliver guided his horse over a particularly challenging jump near the tree line, two armed men emerged from the woods and rushed toward him. Master Garrett, rather than protecting his student, actually pulled his own horse aside to give the attackers a clear path to their target. But Marcus was ready. The hidden archers released a coordinated volley that dropped both attackers before they could reach Prince Oliver, while disguised guards converged on Master Garrett to prevent his escape. The entire action lasted less than 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds had nearly cost the kingdom one of its princes. Prince Oliver, initially confused by the sudden violence, quickly understood what had happened when Marcus explained the situation to him. The boy's reaction was a mixture of fear at the danger he had faced and anger at Master Garrett's betrayal. "Captain Thornfield," the young prince said with a maturity beyond his years, "how many other people around us might be working for these conspirators?" It was a question that Marcus had been dreading, because the answer was both unknown and potentially terrifying. "That's what we're working to determine, Your Highness. But I want you to understand that this experience shows our security measures are working. We identified the threat and neutralized it before anyone was harmed." The interrogation of Master Garrett revealed additional disturbing information about the scope of the conspiracy. The riding instructor had been approached by Lord Ashford's agents 3 months earlier and offered a substantial sum to ensure Prince Oliver had a fatal riding accident. The plan had been to make it appear that the young prince had simply fallen from his horse during a routine exercise, avoiding the suspicion that would come with a more obvious assassination attempt. More troubling was Master Garrett's revelation that he was not the only member of the castle staff who had been approached by the conspirators. According to his confession,
At least a dozen servants, guards, and minor officials had been offered bribes or threatened with blackmail to gain their cooperation in various aspects of the conspiracy.
"They've been planning this for years," Master Garrett said during his interrogation, his voice hollow with the realization of what he had almost participated in. "Lord Ashford said that Queen Isabella's reign had weakened the kingdom, made it vulnerable to enemies.
He convinced many of us that removing the royal family would actually be serving the greater good." Marcus recognized the sophisticated propaganda techniques that had been used to recruit the conspirators. By framing their treason as patriotic duty, Lord Ashford had managed to overcome the natural loyalty that most citizens felt toward the royal family. It was a disturbing reminder of how political manipulation could turn even decent people into willing participants in terrible acts. The information extracted from Master Garrett also revealed the timeline for the final phase of the conspiracy. The summer solstice festival, just 4 days away, was to be the occasion for a coordinated strike that would eliminate the entire royal family in a single day. The plan involved simultaneous attacks during the public celebrations, when security would be stretched thin and the royal family would be most vulnerable. According to Master Garrett's knowledge, the attacks would include poisoned food at the royal banquet, armed assassins disguised as festival performers, and a planned fire that would trap the royal family in the castle's great hall. The coordination required for such a complex operation spoke to resources and planning capabilities that went far beyond what Marcus had initially imagined. As Marcus prepared to brief Queen Isabella on these latest developments, he reflected on how dramatically the situation had evolved since Princess Charlotte's rescue 6 days earlier. What had initially appeared to be a simple kidnapping attempt had revealed itself to be part of a systematic effort to overthrow the monarchy and reshape the kingdom's political structure. The race against time had become even more urgent. With only 4 days remaining until the summer solstice festival, Marcus and his team had to identify and neutralize all remaining conspirators while simultaneously preparing for what might be the most dangerous day in the kingdom's recent history. The very survival of the royal family, and potentially the kingdom itself, hung in the balance. The summer solstice dawn broke clear and bright over Aldermere Castle, but for Captain Marcus Thornfield, the beautiful weather felt like a mockery of the deadly serious preparations that had consumed the past 3 days. Every available guard, every loyal servant, every trusted ally had been mobilized for what would either be the kingdom's greatest triumph against internal treachery or its most devastating defeat. Marcus stood on the castle's highest tower, surveying the festival preparations in the courtyard below. Colorful banners fluttered in the morning breeze. Vendor stalls were being assembled for the traditional market, and musicians were already tuning their instruments for the day's celebrations. To any casual observer, it appeared to be nothing more than the joyous preparation for one of the kingdom's most beloved annual traditions. What those observers couldn't see were the dozens of disguised guards positioned throughout the crowd, the carefully screened vendors who had undergone intensive background checks, and the multiple layers of security that had been woven seamlessly into the festival's traditional activities. Every performer had been verified, every food vendor had been investigated, and every possible route into or out of the castle grounds had been secured. The intelligence gathered over the past week had allowed Marcus to construct a comprehensive picture of Lord Ashford's conspiracy. The exiled noble had spent years building a network of supporters throughout the kingdom, promising them power and privilege in exchange for their assistance in overthrowing Queen Isabella. His plan was audacious in its scope and meticulous in its execution, but it had one critical flaw. It relied on the element of surprise. That element had been lost the moment Princess Charlotte was discovered in the trunk. Duchess Camilla had been returned to the castle 2 days earlier, still weak from her ordeal, but able to provide crucial intelligence about the conspiracy's methods and timeline. Her testimony revealed that she had indeed been coerced into participating, threatened not just with her own death but with harm to innocent members of her extended family. The guilt she felt over her forced cooperation was evident in every word she spoke, but her information had proven invaluable in preparing the castle's defenses. "Captain," came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see Queen Isabella approaching, accompanied by her personal guard. Despite the danger surrounding her family, the Queen had insisted on proceeding with the festival, arguing that canceling it would send a message of weakness to both the conspirators and the general population. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, bowing respectfully.
All preparations are complete. The castle has never been more secure than it is today." The queen nodded gravely. "I want you to know, Captain, that whatever happens today, you and your men have already saved my family and likely the kingdom itself. The conspiracy you've uncovered and dismantled represents a threat that could have destroyed everything we've worked to build." Marcus appreciated her words, but he knew the day was far from over. "Your Majesty, I must ask you once more to consider relocating to the secure chambers during the most dangerous parts of today's events. The public appearances could be conducted by carefully chosen substitutes." Queen Isabella's expression was resolute. "Captain, if I hide from my own people on one of our most important traditional celebrations, I hand victory to the conspirators regardless of whether their attacks succeed. The monarchy's strength comes from the trust and loyalty of the people, and that trust requires me to be present when they expect to see me." It was the answer Marcus had expected, though not the one he had hoped for. The Queen's courage was admirable, but it also meant that the margin for error in their security preparations was essentially zero. The first test of their defenses came shortly after midday, when the traditional feast was served to the gathered crowd. Intelligence from the captured conspirators had indicated that poison was to be introduced into the royal family's food, but the specific method had remained unclear. Marcus had addressed this threat by completely replacing the castle's kitchen staff with personnel from his own guard unit, individuals whose loyalty had been tested over years of faithful service. Additionally, every dish served to the royal family was prepared in duplicate, with Marcus himself randomly selecting which version would be presented to the royals. Food tasters, a practice that had been abandoned decades earlier as unnecessary, had been quietly reinstated. The precautions were extensive, but they proved their worth when one of the substitute dishes showed signs of tampering that would have been undetectable without careful examination. The discovery of the poisoned food confirmed that conspirators remained active within the castle, despite the arrests and security sweeps of the previous week. Marcus immediately ordered a lockdown of the kitchen area and began a systematic investigation of everyone who had been near the food preparation. The investigation quickly led to a scullery maid who had been added to the staff just 2 weeks earlier, carrying forged credentials that had passed initial scrutiny but couldn't withstand deeper investigation. Under interrogation, the false scullery maid revealed that she was part of a final, desperate attempt to salvage the conspiracy's objectives. With their primary plans disrupted, Lord Ashford had ordered his remaining agents to improvise attacks using whatever means were available. The poisoning attempt had been just one of several backup plans designed to eliminate at least some members of the royal family, even if the main operation failed. This revelation forced Marcus to reconsider his entire security strategy. Instead of defending against a coordinated attack following a known plan, he was now facing an unknown number of improvised attempts by desperate conspirators who might try anything. The unpredictability of desperate people made them more dangerous in many ways than carefully planned operations. The afternoon brought the festival's traditional performance period, when traveling musicians, dancers, and actors entertained the gathered crowd. This had always been identified as one of the highest-risk portions of the day, as it would be relatively easy for assassins to disguise themselves as performers and get close to the royal family's viewing platform. Marcus had addressed this threat through a combination of careful screening and strategic positioning. Every performer had been investigated thoroughly, their backgrounds verified through multiple sources, and their equipment inspected for concealed weapons. Additionally, the royal viewing platform had been redesigned to provide better protection while maintaining the appearance of accessibility that tradition demanded. The precautions proved necessary when, halfway through a juggling performance, one of the entertainers suddenly produced a crossbow from beneath his colorful costume and aimed it directly at Crown Prince Alexander. The weapon had been cleverly disguised as part of his juggling equipment, assembled from components that appeared harmless individually but could be quickly combined into a lethal weapon. The attack was thwarted by Marcus's quick thinking and faster reflexes. Having positioned himself with a clear view of all the performers, he was able to tackle the would-be assassin before the crossbow could be fired. The struggle was brief but violent, ending with the attacker subdued and the weapon safely secured. The incident sent ripples of alarm through the gathered crowd, but Queen Isabella's calm response helped prevent panic. Standing gracefully from her seat, she addressed her people with the poise that had made her one of the most respected monarchs in the kingdom's history. "My loyal subjects," she announced in a voice that carried clearly across the courtyard, What you have witnessed today is proof that there are those who would harm your royal family to serve their own selfish ambitions. But as you can also see, such treachery cannot succeed against the vigilance of those who serve the crown and the loyalty of those who support it." Her words transformed what could have been a moment of fear into a demonstration of unity between the monarchy and the people. The crowd's response was immediate and powerful, a roar of approval and loyalty that seemed to shake the very walls of the castle. But Marcus knew that the day's dangers were not yet over. Intelligence suggested that the final and most dangerous attack would come during the evening's traditional torch-lighting ceremony, when the royal family would be most exposed and visible to the gathered crowd. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Marcus made his final preparations for what he hoped would be the conspiracy's last desperate gambit. The torchlighting ceremony was the culmination of the summer solstice festival, a moment when the queen herself would light the great ceremonial flame that would burn throughout the night. The ceremony required the queen to walk from the castle's main entrance to the center of the courtyard, carrying the ceremonial torch and accompanied only by her immediate family. It was a tradition that dated back centuries, symbolizing the monarchy's connection to the people and their shared commitment to the kingdom's prosperity. It was also the perfect opportunity for a determined assassin. Marcus had positioned guards throughout the crowd, but the sheer number of people and the low light conditions created numerous opportunities for someone with ill intent. As the royal family emerged from the castle and began their ceremonial walk, Marcus found himself scanning faces, watching hands, looking for any sign of the final attack that he was certain was coming. The attack, when it came, was both more and less than he had expected. Instead of a single assassin, a coordinated group of 6 individuals positioned throughout the crowd suddenly moved toward the royal family, each carrying weapons that had been concealed among festival supplies. But their coordination, which should have been their strength, became their weakness when Marcus's carefully positioned guards were able to respond with equal coordination. The battle that followed was brief but intense. 6 conspirators against 24 guards was never going to be a fair fight, but the desperation of cornered enemies made them dangerous opponents. When the combat finally ended, 3 of the attackers were dead, 2 were severely wounded and captured, and 1 had been taken alive and uninjured. Most importantly, every member of the royal family was safe and unharmed. As the crowd was safely dispersed and the castle secured for the night, Marcus allowed himself a moment of profound relief. The conspiracy that had threatened to tear apart the kingdom had been defeated, its leaders captured or killed, and its network of supporters exposed and neutralized. The interrogation of the final captured conspirator revealed that Lord Ashford himself had been among those killed in the evening's fight, dying in a last desperate attempt to salvage his years of planning. With his death, the conspiracy effectively collapsed, as he had been the charismatic leader, holding together the diverse group of malcontents and ambitious nobles. In the weeks that followed, the full scope of Lord Ashford's conspiracy became clear, through careful investigation of his papers and the testimony of captured supporters. The plot had involved over 50 individuals throughout the kingdom, from minor nobles to corrupt merchants to disaffected military officers. The systematic dismantling of this network would take months, but the immediate threat to the royal family was over. Queen Isabella's handling of the crisis had, if anything, strengthened her position and increased her popularity among the people. Her courage in facing the threats directly, rather than hiding behind layers of security, had demonstrated the kind of leadership that inspired loyalty and respect. For Marcus, the successful defense of the royal family represented the culmination of 15 years of faithful service. The Queen's formal recognition of his achievements, delivered in front of the entire court, was gratifying. But his real satisfaction came from knowing that he had fulfilled his oath to protect those entrusted to his care. Princess Charlotte, now fully recovered from her traumatic experience, had insisted on personally thanking Marcus for his role in her rescue. The conversation was brief but meaningful, as she expressed not just gratitude, but a new understanding of the responsibilities that came with royal birth. "Captain Thornfield," she had said, "what you've taught me is that being royal isn't just about privilege and ceremony. It's about earning the loyalty of people like you through our actions and our character." As Marcus stood once again on the castle's highest tower, this time watching the peaceful preparations for the harvest festival, he reflected on how dramatically things had changed. The kingdom was safe, the royal family was secure, and the conspiracy that had threatened everything they held dear had been defeated. But he also knew that vigilance could never be relaxed. There would always be those who sought to harm the innocent for personal gain, and there would always be a need for people willing to stand against them. As long as he drew breath, Marcus would continue to serve as that shield between the royal family and those who would do them harm. The summer solstice had passed, the conspiracy had failed, and the kingdom endured. It was, Marcus thought, exactly as it should be.